Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm Loren Feldman. As usual, I'm here with Gene Marks to talk about the stories and issues we think business owners should be following this week. Great to have you here, Gene.
Loren, thanks for talking.
Oh, my pleasure always. Where are you today?
I am in London today. I've been here all week.
Wow. Are you there on a reporting assignment?
Yeah, right. Well, actually, I did report back to somebody else about what's going on with small businesses here in the UK, which is always fun to talk about.
Tell me, what's going on?
I got news for you. Businesses here, I've been to quite a few different shops. I actually spoke to a few business owners here. And, when you drive around London, you can't believe there was a pandemic here. I mean, the stores are open, very few vacancies, nothing out of the ordinary than what I've remembered in the past 30 years of coming here 3 or 4 times a year. I have family here. So things look good. Plus the businesses here got a bit of a boost from the Queen's Jubilee, which happened just a couple weeks ago. The weather has been fairly decent in London, which is unusual. But having said that, like our friends at home in the U.S., lots of concern here about inflation and rising interest rates and and fuel prices and heating and utility prices. So everything seems fine now, but nobody is looking forward to the fall.
Interesting. And you talk about Brexit and its impact?
No, it's just old news. And people are moving on, from that. I mean, I'm sure if you were to talk to people, bring up the topic specifically, people would be happy to talk about it, but it's just not high of mind.
Right.
Lots of stores I walk by in this neighborhood, and then also a nearby neighborhood, which we've been going to, lots of help wanted signs that are out there. So clearly the Brits are experiencing the same labor issues that the American business owners are having as well. And then the other thing I can report is that my plane was full going there. And people are coming, the tourists are out, and about. The tube we've been on a bunch of times, very crowded. So people are out and about, moving around.
Have you written the story that you're going to do about this, or is that something we can look for?
I'm not going to do any specific story. I wasn't planning on it. But who knows? I might think about it on the flight home.
I hope
and
you
maybe
do.
There's an angle to come at here. But there's nothing, no shaking of ground. So there's nothing that comes to mind right away. But we'll see, maybe.
Got it. All right, let's dig into a couple issues. One, you wrote about, you did a podcast about something really interesting recently, which is you suggested that businesses can use their customer relations management software to fight inflation. Can you explain that?
I can, and it was a podcast and also a piece I wrote about it for Forbes. And I just want to let you guys know, if you're listening and you've got a customer relationship management application, there are 2 very big ways you can leverage it to fight inflation. And I'm seeing this amongst some of my better clients. Number one is just data. One of the things that our fathers and mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers didn't have back in the 70s when inflation was really hitting them is they didn't have the kind of communication systems that we have today. And one of the big things I'm seeing my clients do, one of the many things, but one of the bigger ones is to navigate their way through inflation, supply chain issues, lead times, all these rising prices. My better ones have really stepped up their communications with their customers, So if they are seeing issues, if they want to keep their customers up to date, they're leaning heavily on their CRM systems to do just that. And by doing it, that means really having great data in your system and segregating it well, and then leveraging the mass email capabilities, mass texting as well, that many of these comes with, because your customers, they know we're in tough times right now. They just want information and they want to know what's to come. Right. And we have systems now that we didn't really have 20 years ago, small businesses. So really communicate with our customers. So use them. Leverage your CRM system to have regular communication with your customers. You will keep them happier and keep them in the fold. That was number one. The second thing I'm seeing to battle inflation is just leveraging all this automation that all the mainstream applications have. And so many of my clients are using their CRMs like contact managers still back in the 80s. My better ones are talking to their vendors, Salesforce or Microsoft or Zoho or whoever, and they're learning about all the built-in automation that these things now have, so that if somebody comes to your website, they can fill out a form and have a question answered for them automatically, or they can request information and it can be sent out to them automatically without a human being involved, or if they need to have a chat with somebody about a product that you're selling or a service, you can set up chatting from your CRM system on your website where that is happening, and your CRM system is chatting with this visitor based on a standard set of responses that you give, and then escalating it if it goes beyond that. All of these types of automation and AI tools that these CRM systems have, Loren, they reduce overhead. You have to have, it's less employee hours having to do that, which means potentially less employees. So, the companies with the, lowest overhead, they're the ones that navigate the best through inflationary times.
Gene, you've talked to us in the past a good bit about how a lot of businesses, if not most, fail to use all the capabilities of these systems, in part because they're intimidated by them and they don't take the time to really figure them out. Are the things, the applications you're talking about now, are they difficult to get started with? Should someone feel intimidated, or do you have advice for somebody who does feel intimidated?
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's not like you're used to, it's not like turning on a TV, so it's something you're going to have to learn, some time that you're going to have to invest. So that's not easy. If it was so easy, everybody would be doing it instead of the 90% of my clients who struggle, with doing these things. But I'm telling you, if you're like, hey, that for the next year, you're going to be in an environment where you've got rising prices and supply chain challenges. I mean, we know this. Talk to any small business owner, right? So I'm like, all right, you need to do everything within your arsenal to navigate your way through this. And if I'm telling you that if you learned how to use the communication features in your CRM system better to regularly stay up to date with your customers, and if you learned about all of the AI and workflow tools so that you can cut out employee hours doing stuff automatically, then that's going to reduce your costs and help you better navigate through inflation, then you're dopey for not doing it. And yeah, okay, maybe it's not going to come to you right away. Somebody's got to teach you how to do it, or maybe you hire a consultant to train somebody or configure it for you. But for God's sake, do it.
Are the companies themselves helpful if you reach out to them?
Depends on who you're talking to. It's another great question. I mean, it's like anything else. If you call up Salesforce or Microsoft or Zoho, or Insightly or Nimble or Sugar, yeah, there's great people on their support and sales side, and there's dopey people as well. You know what I mean? So if you're not getting the answers, you got to push for the answers. And don't forget, all these CRM systems have, outside consultants and experts like our firm.
Right.
So you can go on LinkedIn and look for a Salesforce expert or a Dynamics expert from Microsoft. You'll get plenty of them. Yes, they're going to charge you an hourly rate. But okay, so you cough up $1,000 to save you $10,000 on overhead over the next year. It's just, to me, it's like a no-brainer. And again, our parents never had this stuff, last round of inflation. So, use it, man. It's really valuable stuff.
Especially if you're paying for the system, why not?
Agreed.
All right, next topic. Gene, you recently wrote about a kind of good news, bad news situation. The bad news is that, as you've told us here several weeks now, there's a real strong possibility of a recession in our near future. And because of that, we can expect some more bankruptcies. They've actually been down of late, in part because of all the government funding, but that is likely to change. The good news, you said, is that the rules have changed a little bit and gotten better for businesses that have to reorganize. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, and for that you can thank Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, who he has sponsored a bill that back in 2019 that passed called the Small Business Reorganization Act. And then he just updated that bill with a new bill that was just signed by the president last week, Loren, for small businesses that are potentially going bankrupt. And if you're like really facing headwinds and you're looking at, potential bankruptcy, before you would have to do this under Chapter 11 to reorganize yourself. But Chapter 11 was really expensive and time consuming and regulatory and administrative work had to be done. Grassley's bill, which just passed, it's this. If you've got less than $7.5 million in debts, so it's for small business, that's how you're eligible. You've got to be a small business with less than $7.5 million in debts. And you decide that you need to go into bankruptcy to reorganize yourself. You can elect, it's now called Subchapter 5 under Chapter 11. You talk to a bankruptcy attorney. And if you do that, then you don't have to get approval from a creditor committee. Your personal assets may not be subject to withdraw. You will not have to be required to put more money into the business. The amount of time that you have to reorganize now won't go on and on forever. It's limited to like 90 days. Your administrative costs will be less and you can pay them off longer. The bottom line is that this Subchapter 5, this new Subchapter 5 in the bankruptcy legislation, it will allow small businesses to reorganize themselves with much less headaches and at a much lower cost. And Senator Grassley told me, I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, he thinks that it will help about 40% more small businesses emerge and reorganize themselves than before this this law was passed. So keep that in mind if you're heading into trouble.
That's really interesting, Gene. I'm curious. Obviously, nobody wants to go through this, but do these new rules make it a plausible, positive alternative for more businesses? In other words, because of the relaxation of the regulations, does it mean that this is a viable option for even for businesses who previously wouldn't have considered bankruptcy?
Because, like Senator Grassley had said, that 40% number, what he saw in his state, there's a lot of ag businesses, a lot of people, farmers, if they face issues like this, they are really they look the cost of reorganizing under Chapter 11 and they're like, you know what, this is just too expensive, too much time, whatever. We're just going to liquidate. It's not worth it. But with this new Subchapter 5 rules, a lot of those businesses would look at it and say, okay, it's not so expensive or time consuming or regulatory for me to reorganize. I can still save my business, rather than liquidate. And I think that it will become a really good, viable alternative for those small businesses, again, with less than $7.5 million in debt.
Good to know. All right, next. Fortune recently ran a story about ways that businesses can increase profits without raising their prices. And the biggest examples they gave of restaurants that choose to push people in the direction of meals, orders that offer a higher margin to the business, and also examples of item pricing, of what airlines do when they force you to pay extra for meals or for to bring baggage or to have air to breathe or whatever they choose. The point Fortune made was that nobody likes those item pricing changes, but by and large, they've accepted them. Their behavior hasn't really changed, and it may be something for businesses to keep in mind right now. What do you think?
Well, first, the item prices, like, you get on, have you flown like Spirit or JetBlue?
I have not.
It's like you buy like a $35 ticket and then it's like to check in will be another $35, and like, to bring a bag to select a seat will be another $35, to bring a bag. By the time you're back in like $300 for a ticket with all the extra fees. But I think the Fortune article really hits a point, which is this. I mean, again, this gets back to the CRM part of this conversation. We have data that we never had before. So yeah, if you've got good data in your system and you can really pinpoint those products that you're selling that have the highest margins, that you're making good enough money on, then you should be turning around and leveraging that. You should be selling more of that because maybe you don't even have to raise prices if you've already got a decent margin, and you can double down on getting that product out the door. And I love that because, again, it's just not something that the typical small business owner had back in the 70s. We've got really great, accounting and ERP and CRM systems that have this data. So you should be leveraging to do just that. The same thing that I've seen is without raising prices. You and I talked before about shrinkflation, so I see that a lot. I got a chicken pot pie at my favorite restaurant in Philly like last week, and Lauren, I could swear there was less goddamn chicken in that chicken pot pie. But you know what? When I like sucked it down, I had a couple of more potatoes and whatever.
You respected that business owner for doing
Yeah, a
what had
little
to be
bit.
done.
I'm like, all right, the guy's putting a few less pieces of chicken in here. He's still charging the same price, and I'm still satiated. So, it's shrinkflation is another way of doing it. You know what I mean? Like selling things a la carte, selling a little bit less for the same price, focusing on those higher margin products and pushing those instead of the lower margin ones. Those are all really good tactics from a selling side to get around these times. One thing you got to admit though, Lauren, I mean, there's not enough articles about this. And I'm fascinated. That's what I talk about is like, we all know inflation is with us. So what are businesses doing, to navigate their way around it? That's what I want to know, and that Fortune article was great for that reason because it gave some really good examples.
Cool. All right. Finally, Elizabeth Danziger, founder of Work Talk Communications Consulting, wrote a piece for Inc. last week saying that it's now okay since the pandemic to swear in the office. She cited studies indicating that people used to consider people who swore stupid, but now it's actually a badge of intelligence. I don't know if you're the right guy to ask about this, Gene, since you work by yourself in your home, but you've worked in an office before. What do you think?
I think it's a bunch of fucking bullshit.
I knew that was coming.
You knew that was coming, right? No, I actually do think it's a bunch of bullshit. I don't think there's, first of all, I don't know if you all feel the same way I do. I mean, yeah, we don't have official offices, but I do go to a lot of clients and spend a lot of time in offices. And I am so way more than a few years ago. I mean, pandemic aside, I am so more conscious about what I'm talking, what I'm saying when I'm around people. Like when there was a time like there was like some younger woman, some woman in her 20s at some meeting, who I've known, for like the past couple of years, and she was wearing like a nice shirt. And I was going to say something like, "Oh, that's a really nice shirt. It looks great on you." Thank God I didn't say anything. And I told my wife about that later, and she said, "You would have been. Oh my God, don't even think about it." It's the same thing about swearing. I mean, we live in a very sensitive world right now, and there is such a chance that somebody in your office, an employee or a visitor, will be offended or upset because you said a swear word in the office. You know what I mean? It triggered them. And
but it's okay on podcasts, I guess.
Yeah, it's on pod. Just fuck, who gives a fuck? So but when you're face to face and you're in a profession, first of all, this is not a professional environment. It's Lauren and
Excuse
Gene.
me.
Yeah, you can't get any less professional than this. But in an office where there's younger people around, and I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
I think they swear more than the older people,
maybe,
Gene, not less.
I don't know. And I'm not going to test that theory out because I feel like I'm going to get sued or fired or people are going to get upset with me. I mean, what would you do, Lauren, to say if you're running a company, say you've got 10 or 50 employees, would you be swearing in front of them? I mean, I can't imagine I've never really heard you curse. Say something bad right now.
I do curse from time to time. I try not to make a habit of it in public settings. And no, in the situation you describe, I would not. I would point out that the woman who wrote this piece did offer some guidelines. And one was, don't be the first person to swear. And, maybe that's a good start. Let somebody else go first. And if it sits well, then you can join in. Although that does take some of the impact away if you were hoping that you're doing it would give emphasis to whatever it is you're trying to say.
Right. That's fair enough. That's not bad advice. But at the same time,
you notice I let you go first in this situation, Gene.
And yet you still haven't sworn, even though I'm dropping the F-bomb left and right. You're still.
I'm tempted.
Yeah, you're taking the high road. I just think avoid it. I think it's I think at any age I think it's inappropriate. And I just honestly, I just say, outside of the office, as you could tell, I mean, I swear all the time. I mean, that doesn't.
We're
But
getting that
when you're
impression.
around other people, I just don't think it's fair. I just think if you're in an office environment, and I just don't think it's fair to other people if they don't really want to sit around and hear something that's offensive to them. They're in an office. They're not your friends. They're not. You're not at a bar. So, I disagree with her.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. All right. Gene Marks is a CPA who writes weekly on small business for The Guardian, The Hill, The Philadelphia Inquirer, The Washington Times, Forbes, and Entrepreneur. You can also hear him on ABC Radio's Eye on the World with John Batchelor. Gene hosts 2 small business podcasts with Paychex Corporation and The Hartford. And today he was reporting from London, England. Thank you, Gene.
Loren, we will talk to you next week. Great talking.
Have a great week, everyone.